Well, hello, welcome back to World Hoppers, a collaborative booktube channel where all AdSense and merch sales go to charity. So you're doing good things and learning about books. Today we're doing the mid-year book freakout tag, or whatever its title is, mid-year, whatever it is, fantasy edition. And we have two lovely people here with me as well. We have Miss Sarah and Miss Leanna. I think you guys have both been on World Hoppers before, especially Leanna, once or twice. Have you not been on here before, Sarah?
No, I haven't.
Introduce thyself.
I am Sarah. My channel is Fairy Reads. I don't read very many fairy books, but I do like fantasy a lot.
There's no honesty in advertising anymore.
No, there isn't. Yeah, that's pretty much everything about me.
All right.
And of course, channels will be linked below in the description, so you should go and check out Sarah's content, of course. So let's just dive straight in because there are a ton of questions, friggin' 15 questions. So we'll just jump straight into what is the best book you've read so far this year?
As ever,
and we usually go
prepared. What did I even
clockwise? So I mean, you have time. You can buy time while Sarah
have a long answer, Sarah.
Okay,
take your time.
I did prepare a little bit. I have some books on my table next to me. So I was thinking about this so hard. I don't know if I have like a best book that I've read this year so far. Like nothing is standing out to me like it's going to be a new all-time favorite or anything.
Same.
But one book that I don't know. It's been like a weird year so far, I think. But one book that I did really like was To Poison a King by S.G. Prince. This is a fantasy romance, I guess. And it's about this girl who is in a line of royal healers. Her mother gets her to poison the king to try to kill him. He doesn't die, but he ends up pretty disabled, so her mother flees because she just tried to kill the king. So this girl is basically left to try to heal the king. And I really enjoyed it. It was like very character driven. So the first half of the book just felt very like you're just spending time with the characters, which is like my favorite thing. So I really liked that.
So it's fantasy romance. So is the king incredibly sexy? Is he tall? How is he described? Is he darkly handsome?
I think there's a difference between like romance that has fantasy and your fantasy of romance.
I think it's like, I would say it's like right in the middle between like fantasy driven and romance driven. So it's like, I wouldn't say it falls into either category. But
anytime someone says fantasy romance, like I know what they mean is that it's like a speculative story that has like stunt in it. But like fantasy romance sounds like fantasy is the descriptor for the romance. And therefore it's just like your ideal fantasy, romance, as opposed to like, romance with fairies.
Yes.
haven't people been calling it romantasy now, which I kind of find highly entertaining.
It's like a couple name for the genre.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember if the guy in this book is supposed to be very sexy, but I'm assuming that he was.
Isn't that like a requirement? Well, I've been doing a lot of rereading this year, and unfortunately, almost anything that I've starred 5 stars this year has been a reread. So, for books that are not a reread, I guess Blood in the Mist would be my favorite so far this year, which like, I mean, I liked it, but like, dang, it's not been a great year, guys.
That's like the old familiar one, right? That's like foundational fantasy type stuff.
Yeah, it's pre-Tolkien, and Neil Gaiman loves it, was inspired by it. Susanna Clarke, who wrote Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, loves it, was inspired by it. So I read it as like I'm interested in the history of the genre before Tolkien, what is this? And I ended up really, really liking it. And I do feel like, you could see how Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell kind of like took some of his inspiration from it. Cause like, that's kind of what it reminded me of, even though it came first. So like Jonathan Strange should be reminding me of Lud and not the other way around. But you get what I mean. It's like when you read Dune and you're like, oh, this feels so derivative. And you're like, that's because everything was copying Dune. But
that was me reading Empire of Silence. I was like, isn't this Dune? Literally down to like fear is the death of reason or something. And I was like, that sounds oddly familiar.
But that's the thing, though, when you read Dune, is because so many things have copied it, that it feels really trite and derivative when you read Dune. And, like, you have to remind yourself that, like, I mean, not that he wasn't inspired by anyone, but, like,
it came first. I have been having the same. I was looking through mine, and I was like, it's been an interesting reading year. Largely, possibly because I was also writing my thesis.
Blood in the Mist, it predates Tolkien, but more importantly, perhaps for what just was the previous, or what we were just talking about, is it predates the idea of writing about fairies in a romantic or smutty way. Because, like, Blood in the Mist is about this little town that's, like, very much like an English village kind of vibe called Blood in the Mist, and it sits on the border of fairy. And so, like, there's, like, this black market of fairy fruit, and fairy fruit has, like, you know, effects on people, which is why they would want it and why the town has banned it. And it's, like, a lot about, like, small town politics and about, like, social norms being challenged. And, like, the fairy fruit is kind of like an allegory for a lot of things. And fairies aren't, like, hot dudes and, you know, immortal fae shenanigans. Like, no, it's like the old school idea of, like, this kind of other, this risky thing, this, like, thing that's outside the bounds of society and normalcy. And it's like filled with, like, a lot of social commentary and kind of witty, snarky humor, and it's written in this kind of, like, fanciful old-timey way. And I thought it was really, really fun and really, really interesting. So it was nice to read a fantasy that wasn't a quest, Tolkien, and the fairies weren't slutty. So, like, it was just like, oh, I haven't seen this, like, in a really long time.
Since the 1800s or whenever that book was released.
So I recommend it. It's quite different from what we normally get in fantasy nowadays.
But it's also interesting that that's the best book you've read, and you don't sound like you're gushing about it. You just sound like you were stimulated by it in a mental way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those that, like, I didn't come away from it going like, guys, this is the greatest book I've ever read, favorite of the year, let's go. I was more like, wow, that was quite a little book right there. I am glad I read that. That's the best of the year so far.
That's the state of your reading this year.
Just gotta be reading First Law all the time. Best of the year is all of my rereading of First Law.
For me, I guess I'd have to say it was
the Blade itself.
That's coming up later. I do have that as one of my answers. Which one, though? But I think the best book I've read this year, like the best reading experience I've had this year, was for The Battle Drum by Sara El-Arifi, which is book 2 in the Ending Fire trilogy. Book 1 was The Final Strife. And it was just everything I wanted from a sequel that I didn't know that I wanted, because it was very different than book 1. Book 1, we were kind of dealing with the aftermath of this uprising and this kind of magical competition that felt very comfortable, almost like dystopian YA type story with a very traumatic world. It's not a YA story in any stretch of the imagination. But book 2 was like this really fun, like, mystery of, like, a new POV got introduced, and you're trying to figure out, who is this? Where does this fit into the timeline? Like, what is even happening? And, like, sometimes I hate that, but for whatever reason with The Battle Drum, it just worked. I think it was also because I was buddy reading it with Joshana, so we kept sending messages back and forth predicting, and then one of us would get slightly ahead and be like, oh, that's not it at all.
You're terrible. I wouldn't want to get told. I'd be like, I can neither confirm nor deny.
I just said it in my head. I didn't say to her.
Well, you said we were sending messages back and forth, so I assumed this was
predictions of not taunting. But I guess that's, like, I haven't had very many 5-star reads. I've had a lot of, like, 4 or 4.5. That's disappointing. Whatever. It is what it is. That seems like everybody's reading year this year. It's like, it's been pretty good-ish.
I feel like a lot of series, too, like, a lot of big series that people were really into, like, have been finishing in the last couple of years. And, like, now there aren't, like, a lot of anticipated sequels. Not that there are none, but, like, there's a lot fewer, like, anticipated sequels to, like, really loved series, I think.
Yeah.
Which is a perfect segue into
I didn't even see that.
Which is, what is the best sequel you've read so far? We'll start with you again, Sarah.
Okay, I have, like, a 2-part answer because they're the same series.
Look at you prepared. Ooh,
I know.
Good choice. Leanna also approves of that choice.
Yes.
Oh, yes, I do.
I watched one last year, and I was like, why didn't I read this sooner? So I had to read these two. I read them, I think, both in January because I was like, yes, I love them so much. So those are definitely the best sequels that I've read.
Well, I think
now, which one comes out on top if you had to choose one?
I don't know. I was trying to think about that.
The Girl in the Tower, or is it The Winter of the Witch?
The Girl in the Tower is my favorite.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Winter of the Witch is my favorite. I just like when it gets a little bit more expansive and weird with the world building. And the little mushroom guy, love him.
Okay, yes, the little mushroom guy, absolutely. If we were just rating it based on the mushroom guy, then obviously. I think the only sequel that I read this year that was not a reread happened to also be a sequel that I liked. So the best and only sequel that I've read this year is also like, I mean, it's like stretching the bounds of sequel, but The Hood by Lavi Tadar is the second in his the quartet that he's working on, called the Antimatter of Britain Quartet, I believe is the series. And I say series, yeah, it's the Antimatter of Britain. The first book was By Force Alone, which was about King Arthur, and The Hood is about Robin Hood. So they're like not connected at all. But it's like this quartet where he's like doing the same treatment to like different like figures from like myth and English history kind of thing. I did tell people that you probably wouldn't need to read By Force Alone before reading The Hood, because I kind of figured like why would you ever need to, because King Arthur and Robin Hood have like nothing to do with each other. Turns out like you definitely should read By Force Alone if you're gonna read The Hood. I picked it up and I was like, oh guys, I'm sorry. Actually, you do need to have read that. It's super, super weird. The first one was super weird. The second one was even weirder. So reading the first one helps just to get you like prepared for that weirdness. But also like it does kind of assume you know some things about this kind of like weird version of English history, like the world, so to speak, even though it is England. He kind of doesn't explain some stuff because he assumes that like, well, as much as he ever explained it in By Force Alone, that you will have seen this before and you know what he's getting at. So he doesn't have to explain it. So it's already a weird and disorienting experience reading the first one. And the second one is even more weird and disorienting, especially if you haven't read By Force Alone. I'm not actually like broadly recommending The Hood. I kind of want to say don't read The Hood unless you sound really, really interested in what I'm describing and you're very familiar with Robin Hood. Like, you know all the characters from like all the stories, like you know the main beats of Robin Hood, like you're familiar because he's not going to explain it at all ever. He just assumes you know. If you're pretty familiar with this era of English history, it's like the Crusades, King John, King Richard, Robin Hood. He's not going to explain it. If you also have read and liked Ivanhoe, which I think I'm the only person in the world that likes Ivanhoe, other than apparently
I've never heard
Lavi
of that.
Tadar.
What is Ivanhoe?
Oh, you're killing me. Ivanhoe is a classic by Sir Walter Scott. It's thanks to Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe that the interest, like the public interest in like the Crusades and Robin Hood and all this kind of thing, like became a thing again. Like people got interested in that era again because of Ivanhoe, and then no one cares about Ivanhoe anymore. But we still care about Robin Hood and the Crusades. But we've all forgotten Ivanhoe, which is fantastic. So anyway, there's characters from Ivanhoe, including Robin Hood, but like other characters as well, that would be contemporaries of Robin Hood. So then Lavi Tadar throws them in as well and also doesn't explain that. And I feel like most people haven't read Ivanhoe, but I was like, oh, this is Ivanhoe. So I was like, this book like suits me fine. I literally don't know who else in the world would be enjoying this book right now. But I really like Robin Hood, and I really like Ivanhoe, and I really like English history, and I really like his weird, bizarre, like fantasy, grimdark version of English history. So if any of that sounds good to you, one person who's listening, then you, I'm talking to you, should read it.
For me, I have kind of two answers. The first would be Nolan, which is the first book in the Rise and Fall, but it's technically a sequel series to The Legends of the First Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. But I feel like it's kind of a cop-out because it's like the start of its own mini-series of standalones. So my real answer would be A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. And I liked it pretty much more in every way than Priory. I don't know. We're copping out today. I don't know. I haven't read that many sequels. I haven't even started Before They Are Hanged, but I hear that if I like the Baez plotline, that Before They Are Hanged is going to be my jam. So I just haven't started it yet. But Day of Fallen Night was like better in almost every way than Priory. I like the pacing better. I like the characters better. We got a little bit more of the world. It wasn't just east-west. We also got to see the north and the south. Shockingly, they also exist. And I guess my only complaint about it was the dragons weren't quite as prevalent.
One of the good points about this book is that it includes all 4 cardinal directions.
Instead of just 2. It's better. It makes it more, it feels like more of a fleshed out world than just isolated points. You know what I mean. And I think you definitely could get away with reading Day of Fallen Night without reading Priory. They are separate enough and nothing really spoils anything for either way. So I don't know how much of a sequel it is if it stands on its own like that, but it's my answer.
Apparently it stands on its own more than the Hood does from That's
so funny. You're like, oh, read it. You're like, oh, wait, never mind. Retracted.
Abort!
Okay, so question 3 is a new release you haven't read yet but want to.
Well, speaking of A Day of Fallen Night.
I think you'll really like it. Have you read Priory?
Yeah. And I loved it. And I read her other series as well, and I love that too. So I'm like...
The Bone Season? Is that the other series?
Yeah. I'm eagerly awaiting the next book in that series also, but very excited about A Day of Fallen Night.
I haven't heard anybody hating on A Day of Fallen Night, kind of surprisingly.
That's good.
But I am echoing? Question mark?
I hear the echo. I don't know who it is, though.
I don't hear it.
That means it's you. For a new release that I haven't read yet, I never pay attention to new releases. I just read First Law. That's all I ever do.
Is there supposed to be more in First Law, or is it supposed to be over?
Well, it's over for now, but in the last book that he wrote, like the conclusion to the last trilogy, he's like, it's almost like a Marvel post-credit scene where it's like, okay, so clearly like you intend to come back to this world. But A House with Good Bones, that's new. It doesn't feel new because I feel like it was like posted on Bookstagram for like a full year before it came out. I thought it was out this entire time, only come to learn that like it was, yeah. So I have a copy of it, but yeah, I haven't read that yet. And I really like
it. Came out in like March, maybe?
Something like that. Yeah, again, like I thought it had like been out and I was the last person to have it. No, everyone apparently just had arcs of it, I guess. But yeah, I really liked What Moves the Dead. That was one of my favorites from last year. So I'm hoping this is not exactly the same, but like as good as by T. Kingfisher.
For me, I've been really bad about keeping up with new releases this year. I feel like I've just been reading random backlog stuff, like First Law, started Malaz and Malaz, whatever the hell it's called, started that series. Lots of series that I've been meaning to start forever, but I finally got around to starting this year. So I guess the only one that comes to mind is God Killer by, is it Hannah Witten? Because I hear Elle talk about it all the time, and it sounds like so up my alley with all the gods among us shenanigans, monster hunting, god hunting type stuff. And so I've been meaning to get to it. But more Witcher gods, less present day
I was mostly
gods.
pulling your leg, because technically that's an accurate description of American gods, but like not really.
I've only seen like random episodes of the show. I don't think I've read anything by Gaiman ever.
I don't understand why we're friends.
Hey, I read The Blade itself, and I have before they were hanged right here waiting.
Yeah, okay. That's an olive branch.
Well, now here's the other question that is going to be Leanna's Kryptonite. What is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year?
I have 2, actually. The first one is Talon Sister by Jen Williams, because I love the Winnowing Flame trilogy, and I'm so excited. I don't even know what that book's about, and I'm so excited about it. And then also Spirit of the Wood by Christian Britton. It is a short novel or a long novella in the Green Rider series, and it's like a backstory of one of the characters in that series, and I'm very excited about that, though I do wish the author would just write the last book in the series instead of writing the backstory of one of these characters, but either way. Either way, I'll take it, and I'm excited about it.
I've heard such divisive things about Green Rider. I feel like some people really like it, and then some people really do not. Who is it for? Who would you pitch Green Rider for?
I don't know, because I can totally understand why people don't like it. Because, I don't know, there's just like, things don't really make sense. And I feel like the pacing overall throughout the series is not great. And things happen, and you're just like, what is even happening right now? But I love the main character so much. And like, she is really the focal point of the entire series. So seeing her like grow and like go through all these different things is like what I love about it. And it feels kind of like nostalgic classic fantasy, but not at the same time. So I don't know who it's for, but I love it.
I was desperately hoping that I had pre-ordered something that would I mean, I get that's not fantasy though. So we're doing fantasy edition, Lana. You can't pick that. Oh! Wait, that's all. I mean, okay, it's we're not doing sci-fi, right? I can't do sci-fi.
That's fine. We'll give you a pass on that one. It's SFF. That counts.
I know, but I think they usually do a sci-fi separate thing on World Hoppers. Okay, well, whatever. Thank you. I'm taking this pass. Lightbringer by Pierce Brown. Yes.
That's
the next Red Rising book.
Is that 6, 7?
Yeah. 6. It was supposed to be the last one, but it's not going to be the last one.
Well, we'll find out once you've read it if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I mean, I believe it's because it was like too long. So then he was like, oh, we're going to need another one. But yeah, the last one is going to be Red God, and that's like next year or something. But Lightbringer comes out in July. So it's practically now, but it is technically the second half of the year.
That does count.
And you could argue that it is like, it's Red Rising is kind of more like fantasy than sci-fi in some respects. So it's fine. Yeah, I'm looking forward to all my predictions coming true and Alex weeping.
I still haven't started Red Rising either. Most anticipated, I don't know. I haven't really been looking forward to that many books recently. I'm really just trying to catch up on backlist stuff. I guess maybe the sequels to The Stardust Thief and City of Dusk are coming out later this year, and so hopefully they're good. City of Dusk by Tara Sim. I don't think that you would like it because it's one of those situations where she was a YA author and it's her like debut adult, but it's like not really all the way to adult.
It's just the characters are older now.
Yes, you know what I'm talking about. But the story itself was fun. The world building was cool, and I really liked The Stardust Thief. And where it ended off, we were in a different environment, shall we say, that I'm very intrigued by, and so I want book 2, and I hope that it's really good. But who knows? And speaking of hoping that things were good and then they weren't, what was your biggest disappointment? I'm on fire today. You're welcome.
I have 2 again because one of them I DNF'd. The Dragonfall by L.R. Lamb.
The one with like the red dragon in the middle of the cover?
Yeah. So I was really hoping for like a slow burn romance subplot in there. And that's not what I was getting. And also it just felt like, I don't know, there were scenes that I was like, why are you not telling us about this scene? There's one part where one of the characters is teaching the other one how to pick locks. And they're basically like, they taught him how to pick locks. And I was like, you could have gone so much more into depth with that scene. There could have been so many character moments and like things like that. So it just felt like things were happening, but we were being told what was happening. We weren't seeing what was happening. So I was like, I'm out. And the other one is The Storm of Echoes by Claire Debeau. It's the 4th book in the Mirror Visitors series.
Is Winter with Promise?
Yes. Yeah, that's the first one. I really liked that one and the second one. They were very like intriguing to me. The politics were really cool. The world was really cool. The third book kind of like went off the rails, but I was like, if the ending can be good, then I can be down with it going off the rails. But the 4th book it was just like, it felt like a fever dream. I had no idea what was happening. Like characters that were important in the first half of the series were nowhere to be seen. It was just
Those are translated from French, right?
Yeah, they are. Which I found very cool about it because it felt very like fresh, like at least the first two did. But this one was just.
It sounds like the third one was also quite fresh and going off the rails. Like that sounds fresh.
So fresh that I couldn't understand what was happening.
And to be clear, I'm saying fresh, not French, because things going off the rails.
Yes.
For my biggest disappointment, I forgot about until just now, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you let me down." Is The Magician's Daughter by H.G. Perry. She wrote the Shadow Histories, I think is the series, the Declaration of the Rights of Magicians, and the Radical Active Free Magic duology, which I love. It was like a favorite of the year, and I was hoping H.G. Perry would be like an auto-by author for me, and no. So The Magician's Daughter was not it, and it was super boring, and it didn't have like she wrote about real historical figures in the Shadow Histories. You know, like the characters are like Toussaint Louverture and Wilberforce and William Pitt and Robespierre. Like these are like real people, so there's only like so much wiggle room to like fictionalize them, and she made them feel like such characters that I like wanted to read about and that I was like rooting for, and like bromance between Wilberforce and Pitt I was really into. And then these like completely made up characters in Magician's Daughter, where you can do whatever you want with them, they felt so like flat and lifeless, and I was like, how did you like why what's happening? So yeah, I do think though that people who like Sorcerer's, what is it called, that one that I don't like, Sorcery of Thorns. People like that book a lot. I don't. Yeah. So a lot of people liked that book and I didn't. But I feel like this was kind of like that. And so people might actually like this book a lot, but it's clearly not for me.
For me, I kind of have two answers. The first would be Dead House Gates. I quite liked Gardens of the Moon more than I thought I would. I didn't think I was just going to have this kind of fun D&D romp that it was. And then Dead House Gates just tried to be super serious and super dark and like really graphically violent for really no apparent reason. And so was not a fan. And then the other one would be The Frugal Wizard's Handbook. It's kind of on me. It was Secret Project 2 for Brandon Sanderson. And because of the secret projectness of it, I really didn't know what it was. And what it was not something I would have ever read. So it was, I don't know. For some reason, when you said Frugal Wizard to medieval England, I thought that I was going to get something with wizards, and it was not. It was like kind of dude bro sci-fi with like the I think it's called the white room trope or whatever, where your main character is an amnesiac and he's like figuring things out, but he's really good at fighting for some unknown reason and just like romping through parallel. I don't know. It was not. I would have never read it if I knew what it was. It was not. It was not for me. I was like, what am I? Okay.
This is my first time actually learning what it's about, because like I can't, because that's Brandon Sanderson's secret projects are like a thing. So like I see that on people's thumbnails, like that was a thing people were reading. Literally knew nothing but the title. This is my first time like learning what it's actually about. Like, wow, that sounds bad. Oh no.
Yeah, and he was like, he was inspired by Project Hail Mary and Jason Bourne are kind of his comp like mixture of things, and it. For Brandon Sanderson, I think most people would agree that one of the highlights is his really cool world building. He has good ideas, whether you like the execution of it or not. But then it's like, this one just felt so basic. And I was just like England.
I had built in my mind a whole other impression of, just based on the title, because I like the title. It sounds kind of cheeky. And just like seeing the little, like, I think there's like a little dude in a wizard hat, right? Like on the cover or something?
Yeah.
So like based on that, it was giving me like Pratchett. It was giving like, I don't know, rom-com. It was giving like, I was picturing like Brandon Sanderson doing a Terry Pratchett-esque thing, basically. Clearly not.
It was more Brandon Sanderson trying to do Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but not as good, which I don't even really like that story in the first place.
But also, I feel like Brandon Sanderson's humor, for me anyway, is definitely doesn't work for me. And I think Hitchhiker's Guide only works because of the humor.
Yes. So those would be my biggest disappointments. But now we'll be positive. What's your biggest surprise?
My biggest surprise is Godkiller. I love this. I know that Elle really liked it, and I was like, okay, we generally have similar opinions, so I was expecting to like it. But then I was reading it, and I was like, this is so good. Like, it's so good. I can't wait for the next book. I kind of already want to reread God Killer. So
It's a standalone or the first in a series?
First in a series. I don't know how many books there are supposed to be, if that's decided yet or not. But
I know. I just keep hearing Elle talk about it, and I have it, and I keep meaning to read it
too. I literally just got it because like the sprayed edges on it were like so cool. I was like, I don't know what this is, but it's too pretty to not buy.
Yeah.
And it's so short. There's really no excuse. I could read it in like an afternoon if I wanted to.
Well, part of it for me was too because like it got a US release, but for a while it was only in the UK, and the only copy that I had was this like beautiful like artistically sprayed edges copy, and I was like, well, I can't read that. I was like, I'll wait until I can get it from the library and read it, but I can't in the States until it gets a United States release. Yes. So now it has, so I guess now I can read it, even though I've had it this whole time.
I'm putting it in my box of things to take with me because we're moving. And so I'm going to have like the temporary box of books that I want to read in the near future. And I'm like, if I put it in there, maybe I'll read it sooner. I probably won't. I'll probably still just get things from the library.
Temporary. You just said I'm going to put it in the box of things to take with me because we're moving. And it makes it sound like everything must go, but I will keep like 5 things. And this is one of them.
Well, packing is going to be a nightmare because we were like trying to organize some of my books and they're like double stacked on that back shelf. It's awful. I don't even want to.
Yeah. Anytime you move, you're like, this whole owning books thing, who thought of that? It's a terrible idea. That's when you're like, I wish I was one of those Kindle people that only reads on Kindle. That's the way to go. Until I own a manor house. My biggest surprise, I guess, would be Voice of War by Zach Argyle, which I didn't want to read for several reasons originally, because one, I kind of know him / his spouse. So I was like, it's super awkward if you read a book by somebody that you kind of know and you hate it. And I hate a lot of books. So it's just like, it's just better not to, because the odds are way too high always that I will hate it. So I was like, I'll read it secretly. Because I did hear people praising it a lot. And I was like, maybe I would like it, you know, and I would hate to miss out on that just because I know them. And then also it kept getting comped to Brandon Sanderson. And I know that Zach's a big fan of Sanderson and Bookworm's a big fan of Sanderson. It's getting comped to Sanderson. And I was like,
I don't think his writing is super similar because I read that book. It's the magic system that has a lot of parallels with this, especially Mistborn, with the pushy-pulley.
I'm just saying, like, that's why I was like, I don't know about this, guys. So I will secretly read this. And then if I hate it, no one has to know.
That's so funny.
But I really, really liked it. Yeah. So I was pleasantly surprised and relieved. But yeah, I think if anyone is avoiding it for my reasons, namely the Sanderson reason, like, yes, I don't think it's very Sanderson-esque. Like it also kind of has window pane prose, you know, the sort of like not super formal, not super flowery prose, which is kind of what Sanderson has. So it's like that, but yeah. It was a lot more like filled with like intrigue and politics and like almost bordering on grimdark at times, which was like, oh, like I was expecting not this. So I was like, okay.
Well, my biggest surprise is probably the Blade itself. I thought I would hate it because every time I hear somebody say all vibes, no plot, I get instantly flaccid and want to crawl into a corner. But it was actually really quite compelling. It was way more entertaining than I thought it would be. I, like everybody else who reads the book, I identify way more with Glockta than I think is healthy. Because I was even talking to Leanna, I was like, I feel like he's my spirit animal. She's like, that's one of my merch options. And it was just really good. And like there was a fun, like kind of questy plotline to go to a magic tower. And I want to know more about what's going on with all these people. And so I was really excited to get to book 2. And then whoever had it at the library before me had it for friggin' 5 years because people are rude. But I have it now. And it's what I'm reading next when I finish Memories of Ice to help palate cleanse. Because
when people say all vibes,
very long.
When people say all vibes and no plot, like I get that. But to me, vibes is inherently linked with like chill and like calm and low stakes. And I'm just like, that's not first law. So when people are like, it's just all vibes, and I'm like, no.
Also, my head,
I guess
means
if by
like
vibes you
atmospheric.
mean, yeah.
And usually when I hear vibes, I think like atmosphere. And it's not particularly atmospheric. It's just like really entertaining characters.
The atmosphere is like the oppression of capitalism, the violence of the state, like vibes,
But I literally, I went into it being like, I'm probably gonna hate this. Like every time somebody describes it, it sounds like it would be awful, and it wasn't awful. Although I am really entertained by the fact that he has a very large full color photo of himself on the front cover of the versions that I've been reading, and every time I open the book, I'm like, that was a choice. It's not his choice. I'm assuming it's publishing, but like that's a choice.
Don't really have control over that. It's so funny.
So we'll keep the positivity going. New favorite author.
This one I was thinking about for such a long time because I feel like in order to say someone is a new favorite author, I have to have read multiple things by them. And like trying to find someone that I've read multiple things by that I haven't read before, I don't think I did this year. But one author that I read more of this year was Katie Robert. She writes smutty fantasy romance. And like, these books are so short. Like, it's like 160 pages, so I wasn't expecting a lot, but it was fun. And I've read 3 of her books this year, and I enjoyed all of them, so I'm excited to read more of them. Because it's like I go in, I know what I'm expecting, and I get exactly what I'm expecting, and that's all I want.
Is she the same person who writes the like smutty BDSM Disney stuff, or is that a different person? And this person's just like monster smut.
Well, so she also does Neon Gods, which I read last year or the year before. And I know she has a bunch of other like fantasy romance, but as far as I know, she doesn't do the Disney stuff.
I have a couple for this, but neither is fantasy. Like, it's not even sci-fi. Like, I can't even be like, well, kind of. No, it's like not either.
No, she totally did. I'm not crazy. She wrote the Wicked Villains stuff, which is like weird, smutty, like BDSM. This one's like the Peter Pan one.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that was like
Disney ruin Peter Pan. Yeah, I don't. The only new to me authors that I really love that might be new favorites are not. They're like lit fic authors. I got nada.
I mean, I'm similar to Sarah, where like there's a nostalgia factor that goes into somebody being a new favorite author. Where like I think most of the authors that I've been reading second books from this year, it's like the second book of theirs I've ever read. So it's like too soon. But if I don't know, maybe Joe Abercrombie, if I keep liking his stuff, maybe Samantha Shannon, but I've only read those 2 books by her. Maybe Sarah Ella Reefley, but I've only read the 2 books that she's ever published. So it's kind of like, I don't know. We'll see. And then the next question I always hate. This question, I don't understand who made it. Who's it for?
Yeah, I think before we went live, I was like, I'm pretty sure this tag has a question. And I don't remember what the question is. But I remember there's a question that every year I'm like, who put that there?
I actually have an answer for this one, though. Which is
Look at you go.
I was going to say, you better have one too, Roger.
I don't.
It's Glockta.
So I don't ever like feel like a crush on like characters in novels. Like, I don't know, I just don't get that. But I did read a lot of manga this year. And manga's a whole other story.
Ooh.
So Lloyd Forger from Spy Family. I'm in love with him, and if Elle was here, she would agree with me. I bought my first ever anime figure of him. Like, I love him. He is just ridiculous, and I love him.
Well, my only fictional crush is Glockta, so that will just never change. So.
I'm just like, I don't know. I usually try to answer this question by saying like what my favorite couple is, but like I don't even think I've read anything with like really romantic heavy plot lines for me to even have a favorite
Giselle and
couple.
Artie?
I've only read 1 book with them.
Wasn't that enough? It's
too soon. It's too soon. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna just cop out and we're just gonna move on. New favorite character.
Okay, I don't have one, so I thought about this for a long time.
These questions are very similar though, because if you're thinking of a new fictional crush, I feel like a lot of people interpret that as like a new
I think
favorite
a lot of
character.
people who are trying to have a cop out for a new fictional crush are like, well, I'll go with new favorite character, and they're like, dang it, that's the next question.
Yeah, I don't know if I have like an all-time favorite that's like that I've discovered this year or anything. So
yeah, I've been rereading books and reading bad books, so yeah.
I mean, obviously, a new favorite character for me is Glocta. I wouldn't say that I have a crush on him, but I find him highly entertaining. And just like every time he talks about stairs being his nemesis, I feel it so deeply because I have pretty bad arthritis in my left knee from an ACL replacement. So like going upstairs sometimes is a real challenge.
Just today, someone in my Discord posted a stairs quote in my first law channel, which is truly a thrill. Did I enjoy it? For most people, stairs are a mundane affair. For me, an adventure.
Because I even have crepitus. So like I'll go up the stairs and you'll hear like the crunching of my knee. So I felt it on a very deep level. Yes. Book that made you cry.
Okay, I cry so easily, so this could be any book pretty much. But I wasn't going to put rereads on this list, but I have to because I cried for like an hour. And that's Full Metal Alchemist. Mm-hmm. I have read Full Metal Alchemist twice, and I've seen the anime like 6 or 7 times, so I knew it was coming, and I still cried for like the last hour of reading it because I love it so much.
For me, it's always, is her name Nina? Trauma yes. Every single time.
Yes.
I'll have to go to a reread as well then for this. The Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman, the third His Dark Materials book. Cried both times I read it. That's my least favorite. I gave that series 5, 4, 3 stars. So it's the worst one according to me, but it also always makes me cry. So it's doing something right.
It makes me cry. I don't know. I don't really cry when I read. Did I read anything that was really sad? Not really.
Did you read The Infernal Devices?
Not this year. That was last year.
Did you cry?
No. It was fantastic, but I didn't cry.
Why do you hate Jem?
I love Jem, but I didn't cry. I can't think of anything. I can think of books that I really hated reading that made me want to cry in frustration at reading them, but nothing that touched me emotionally.
I did get a book once from Amazon that must have been next to some soap because I was sneezing and crying when I took it out of the box because of it being so fragranced. I had to return it. I couldn't be in my house. So that would be a book that made me cry.
Book that made you happy.
I did also cry reading this book, but The River of Silver by Shannon Chakraborty. I normally don't love short stories collections that have to do with series, but I think this one for the David Bad trilogy really it showed scenes that you wouldn't have ever seen in the trilogy and didn't really change anything or show you anything new really, but I was just so happy to return to that world because that's one of my favorite series.
Why do I have so many rereads this year? Whose idea was that? This is ridiculous. I've read so many books this year, and it's not actually. But it's not actually
your year
progress.
Of gaming. It's your year of gaming. Your buddy read with The Witcher. It's your buddy read with The Blade itself. It's your buddy read with Red Rising.
Yup.
One of those could have made you happy, though. More happy than the others. I don't know.
I don't like to count rereads though, because it's why am I rereading it? Isn't it because I would think it's good or because I want to or whatever? Okay, I guess Daughter of Smoke and Bone then. I was worried that I wouldn't like it as much the second time. I read it the first time a really long time ago and had this perfect memory of this day of passionately not being able to put it down and just being like completely immersed in it. And I was like, it will never be that again. Like, I probably shouldn't reread it, but I did reread it, and it wasn't quite that experience again, but I did still really, really, really enjoy it. So I was like relieved that it wasn't just this like, oh, it was just like the right day, the right time. It wasn't actually the book. Like, the book is fire. Loved it. So it made me happy that I still liked it.
For me, I guess I would say In the Lives of Puppets by T.J. Klune. It was very sweet and wholesome, and I was really concerned because I loved The House in the Cerulean Sea, was kind of ambivalent about Under the Whispering Door. And I was like, oh God, we'll see what happens with book number 3. And it was just, there was like a murderous nurse robot. There was an adorable little like Roomba that just wants to vacuum things all the time. It was very wholesome and sweet. And then it was like a pseudo Pinocchio adjacent retelling. It was more like there was nods to Pinocchio than it was actually a retelling of anything, but it made me happy. It was very wholesome and sweet. Now, what was your favorite adaptation this year?
Have there been any this year so far?
I guess there was Shadow and Bone season 2.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was this year.
Because I don't think I've seen any others, if there even were any others. So it's my default.
Yeah, I guess Shadow and Bone. I feel like it's also the only one.
I mean, there's also the Little Mermaid live action. I haven't seen it, but I'm very dubious. I don't think it would be a favorite if and when I see it.
Adaptation of an adaptation of a fairy tale from the... I mean, I guess.
It's like Inception. Dun, 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 dun. It's an adaptation of an adaptation of an adaptation.
Or I mean, like Into the Spider-Verse is an adaptation of a comic book, but I haven't read the comic book, so...
I like how we have to have like a unified answer on this, because we're like, we've all seen Shadow and Bone season 2. It wasn't as good as season 1, but it was still a good adaptation, probably better than that original Grisha trilogy.
Better than Rings of Power.
Or was House of the Dragon was this year too, wasn't it?
No, it was last year.
The Last of Us was this year.
It's an adaptation of a video game. Does that count?
I don't know. Episode 3 made me cry. I could say that. Where my husband was making fun of me, he's like, "Are you crying?" And I was like, "No." Favorite video you've made? Oh Jesus! What have I made this year?
Why do I do this tag every year? Tag.
Well, I did a video about the adult Fairy Loot subscription. I did like a year,
like a review of it.
Yeah, like a year's worth of their books, and I showed all the books and everything, and talked about my feelings about their selection and how they could do better, and a bunch of other stuff. And
I was about to ask, what are your feelings? And now it seems clear that lukewarm at best.
Yeah, I definitely think they started off very weak and got better, but I do think they are not great.
Didn't they start with like? Didn't it start with Was it the Holly Black book? Was that their first one?
No, it was the Atlas 6, the City of Dusk, then the Holly Black one.
But those first two were super lame, right? They were like just solid black sprayed edge with maybe an inversion of the color of the normal dust jacket.
Yeah, the first 3 were like that. Then the 4th one also had black sprayed edges that were just like plain, and I was just like, this sucks. But I think their more recent editions, definitely they've been doing a better job. But I just want them to pick books written by authors that haven't written YA before. Like,
well, I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get crossover. They're intentionally picking new adult-y adjacent books so that they hopefully have more crossover with their YA
adults
audience.
that have been subscribed to Fairy Loot feel less like children and can like order a box that's like for them.
But they should call it the new adult box and not the adult box, because I was trying to look and see if they had given any like description of what this box was supposed to be, and it never said like there's going to be a lot of romance or there's going to be a lot of crossover stuff, and it's like I just feel like that was misleading. So
agreed. Oh, I hear an echo again. Question mark? Okay, I don't hear it now. Okay. Yes? No? Okay, great.
Yeah, you're good.
I think my favorite video that I posted this year was I actually recorded it last year, but I posted it this year, so it counts. Um
Do you
and
usually
that's
film that far in advance, or was it just like a very long-term vlog project?
it wasn't a vlog project, but there was like an unusual thing because it was an interview with Leo Carew, the author of the Under Northern Sky series. So we recorded it in December, and I was like, I'll just post that as like my first video of the year. So, I mean, I've read The Wolf, which is the first book in that series, 7 times. So speaking to the author was a delight. And yeah, I don't know if it's a good video, but I enjoyed speaking to an idol of mine. So I hope everyone else had a good time too.
For me, it'd probably be the live show for Squeak, because somehow I got coerced into reading a Omega-verse balloon animal shapeshifter erotica. And I read it with Mara and Jack from Jack on the Bookstack, Chris and Jesse. And it was shocking to me that our consensus was we wish it was longer because she had oddly compelling characters. And we were like, how did this happen? It was like a 50-page novella, and it was wild. And just talking to people about the wildness of the funnel cake icing flavored things that came out of the male people and how they were balloon animal shapeshifters. It was a time to be alive. Your face. Yeah, no, what you're thinking is
it feels very like it would be like circus trauma. You know, like if you're like going to like the creepy carnivals around like Stephen King Halloween Goosebumps time, you know, where like except make it sexual, you know.
But there's all the wholesome moments because their backstory of the 2 balloon shapeshifter animal men is really quite traumatic. And then they like escaped together, and when they sleep, they transform into balloon animals and are intertwined. It was surprisingly touching.
I'm sure.
Most beautiful book you bought this year?
Oh, they mean like aesthetically. Because we were just
assuming
talking about the beautiful intimacy of the balloons mingling, and I was like, is that what we mean by beautiful? Because I got nothing.
What's your most physically aesthetic, pleasing, whatever book that you bought this year? What book brings you joy just from looking at it? Are those the broken binding ones? Yeah.
Yes, they are. I just got them yesterday, and I love them. It's The Day of Fallen Night and Priory of the Orange Tree.
Those are very cool. Well, I actually haven't opened this yet. It's been sitting here for some time, but it's probably the answer. It's the Folio Society edition of Clash of Kings.
Ooh, they make such nice ones with like even like the art on the like slip case.
Mm-hmm.
Someday I want them.
Ooh.
I mean, come on.
I realized if I left myself unmuted, the crinkling would be deafening. But yeah. Ta-da! Yeah, I haven't looked at these at all yet. They've just been sitting there on the shelf. So yeah, there's art on the slipcase.
Ooh, some like Melisandre action.
Mm-hmm. And then obviously the books themselves.
I mean, I don't think you can compete with that. Stunning.
You still have to have an answer.
Well, you can keep showing those off while I think about it.
They're really heavy. It's honestly really hard. Because they're like, I think there's a lot of art in the book, so like it's like on really thick paper, you know, because of the ink that you need, because you need it for the ink. It's very heavy. So, ugh. There we go. What you got for us?
Okay, I think my answer is going to be this version of The Bear and the Nightingale. Because it just fits. Yeah, it's the nice... Because people always talk about how nothing is better than The Bear and the Nightingale with like atmosphere. And so just like this captures that atmosphere of this book so nicely. And then it has the nice little snowflakes. And I freaking loved The Bear and the Nightingale last year. So good. Isn't that when we first met? When we did like a live show with Edie?
Me?
Yeah, you. Because I think you popped in on maybe the girl in the tower.
Or Winter of the Witch. I don't remember now. Possibly? Sure. Let's say yes. I don't remember.
So there's that. I mean, I don't know. My mom pays for my Illumicrate subscription, so I get a lot of pretty books from that. Yay, Mom. Because she doesn't know how to work YouTube enough to watch my videos, and she wanted to. But she's like, well, I can't figure it out. So what I'm going to do instead is pay for this.
That's amazing. Unfortunately, my mother knows how to see my videos, so I can't say, hey, buy me books instead.
And so I think this is the final question. What are some books that you really need to get to by the end of the year?
I mean, ideally all of them. Everything.
All of the books in the world.
Yeah. I'm going to read every single book in the world by the end of the year.
I mean, aim high.
I really need to finish some series because I feel like that is my ongoing goal, and I have not been doing very well with that. So I have one book of the Books of Babel left, but it's very long, and that intimidates me.
Is that the Senlon Sands or whatever?
Yes. And I also have some books by MXTX that I want to read. So the Scum Villain Self-Saving System, I just have one book left of that I want to finish. I don't know. I just need to finish everything. I've been trying to hold off on starting new series because I'm like, I need to finish some stuff. But then I'm like, but I just want to start new series. So I just got to finish them and then I can start them.
Use it as your carrot.
Yes.
Probably the number one thing I need to read by the end of the year happens to be on my TBR this month. So I will be starting it forthwith. And that is Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. It is time. The time has come to finish the series. I'm so scared.
Do you like that series?
But everyone talks about Legacy being devastating, and it's the end. So it's like, I'm good.
For me, I'm kind of in the same boat, just trying to finish series that I've started. So I need to read The Poison Song, and I've been needing to read it since like February, which is book 3 in Winnowing Flame. I want to finish at least the first trilogy in the First Law. I just need to finish everything. I'm in the middle of so many series, just with like 1 or 2 books left, that it's a little embarrassing at this point. So I need to just like read that last book. Like Leanna finally reading Jade Legacy. But I think that does it for the tag. And we're right on time because Elle keeps talking about how she's trying to keep these at an hour or less. So look at us go.
So efficient, just because we skipped the crush question.
So I guess if you're still here, let us know the answer to one of your favorite questions of this tag. But
tell us your answer to the crush question, because we didn't have an answer for that. So
But we will see everybody in the next one. Goodbye.